They thought she was just the cook, an older woman behind a diner counter refilling coffee under a flag at dawn. When a young sergeant scoffed, saying real discipline came from the field, the room went quiet. His words pressed against her like protocol itself. Then she set down her pot, and a worn seal coin rolled from her pocket, catching lightning, like memory proof she'd once served where silence meant survival. She didn't raise her voice, only said, "Orders up." Quiet men leave echoes too. Steam rose from the mess hall trays, turning the fluorescent light into a pale mist. The noon rush had begun, boots shuffling trays, clattering laughter bouncing off metal walls. At the far end of the line stood Lydia, gray-streaked hair tucked beneath a plain cap, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The faded patch on her apron, an old blue triangle with gold stitching, caught a glint of the overhead lamp whenever she turned. "You serve this stuff every day, ma'am?" Sergeant Miller asked, balancing his tray. "Guess cooks don't salute, huh?" A few privates snickered. The radio crackled half-tuned to a country station. Lydia didn't answer. She poured coffee with the calm of someone measuring seconds. "Come on, lighten up," another voice said. "We're just having fun." "Fun?" Lydia murmured, her tone low, steady. "That's one word for routine." Her hand paused mid-pour. A single drop of coffee hit the counter with a soft hiss. The laughter faded not by order, but by atmosphere. Private Eli Grant, youngest in the room, watched her more than the others. There was something deliberate in the way she arranged each tray, how her eyes tracked the clock, how she always faced the flag before closing the urn. "She's strict," one corporal whispered. Disciplined Eli corrected, unsure why he said it aloud. A moment later, Lydia slid Miller's plate toward him, neat, balanced edges clean. "Hot meal, Sergeant," she said. "Measured twice, serve once." He frowned. "That's supposed to mean something." Lydia only smiled. The radio hum deepened, as if the air itself adjusted to her frequency. Still, Eli noticed the outline beneath the apron, a square imprint where a badge might once have rested. His grandfather had told stories of insignia like that. Service marks, quiet proofs that spoke louder than stripes. "Hey, Cook," Miller said again, trying to shake off the hush. "You ever see real action or just pans and spatulas?" Eli caught the faintest spark in her eyes. Not anger, but memory. She set the ladle down gently, every motion slow, controlled. "Depends," she said. "You mean the kind that leaves noise or the kind that leaves order?" The line stalled. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hold its breath. A drop of stew hit the tray. Steam curled like smoke from a salute. Eli felt the weight of the pause. Somewhere behind the counter, a timer dinged, sharp exact. Lydia turned, adjusted it with one practiced motion, and faced them again. "Lunch is up," she said softly. "Let's keep the line moving." Her voice wasn't loud yet. It carried discipline in the silence, like a remembered cadence no one dared to break. Miller cleared his throat, suddenly aware of posture, and moved on. Others followed quieter than before. Eli lingered at the end of the counter, setting down his tray. "Ma'am," he said, almost whispering, "that patch on your apron?" "What unit was it?" Lydia looked down at the faded thread. The corners of her mouth curved. "Old one," she replied. "Doesn't matter which. What matters is it's still sewn on." The boy nodded, unsure what that meant, but feeling the truth of it. Behind them, the radio crackled once more, returning to music's soft guitar, a single voice humming about duty and dawn. They laughed, then she spoke once, and everyone heard discipline in the silence. Morning light slipped through the mess hall blinds, cutting the air into even squares. Pots clanged, trays rattled, and Lydia's crew hurried across the tile like a small orchestra tuning up before a show. Eli had been assigned kitchen duty that week, punishment for a late roll call. Though he didn't mind, something about watching Lydia work felt different, like studying rhythm instead of routine. 2 pans forward, she said, voice steady. Heat 4-5, switch on signal. No recipe card, no measuring cups. Just numbers clipped and clean like coordinates. Yes, ma'am, Eli replied. He reached for a stainless steel spatula. Lydia stopped him with a glance. That one's not balanced, she said. Try the weighted handle. Control starts at the grip. Her words sounded like kitchen advice, but the phrasing, the tone, had the precision of a drill. Eli turned the utensil in his hand. It felt like a baton, not a tool. Steam hissed from the deep pans. Lydia stepped closer, scanning the clock. 5 seconds early, she said quietly. That's good, but remember, 5 seconds early can save lives or ruin lunch. Balance it. The rest of the staff laughed, thinking she was joking. Lydia smiled with them, a flicker of warmth under the calm. Guess discipline was her secret sauce, someone whispered. Eli caught the humor, but his curiosity didn't fade. Every phrase she used carried weight, as if orders from another world had been folded into recipes. He listened closer. Rotate clockwise. Hold the line. Clear zone 2. It wasn't kitchen slang, it was command language softened by years and repetition. He wiped the counter, pretending not to stare. Lydia's movements were exact ladle-measured tray, centered apron crease, aligned with her stance. Then the hum of the extractor fan deepened, mixing with the low murmur of a distant broadcast. The kitchen lights flickered sunlight, catching the rising steam, but then the steam rose like a flag in slow motion. The crew fell into silence without being told. Lydia raised her ladle slightly, as if signaling a shift. Hold position, she said, barely above a whisper. Every worker froze mid-motion, listening. The fan clicked and the moment passed. Lydia lowered her hand. Back to it, she said, and the kitchen moved again. Eli exhaled, realizing his chest had gone tight. He'd followed her order without thinking. She caught his gaze. You okay? Private, yes, ma'am, he said. Just wasn't sure if that was a drill. Lydia gave a faint smile. Everything's a drill, son. Even calm. He wanted to ask more, where she learned that, who she used to be, but she was already moving, resetting pans, straightening rows like nothing had happened. The rest of the crew chattered again, the spell broken, but Eli couldn't unsee it. The invisible formation, the rhythm beneath the noise, the way her words held weight like unseen ranks standing at attention. Ma'am, he said softly. Who taught you to run a kitchen like this? She turned just enough for him to see the glint of the utensil, polished like a metal. Old habit, she answered. Hard to forget when it kept people fed and alive. Then she pivoted toward the stove ladle raised. She wasn't cooking, she was conducting. The smell of breakfast lingered through the mess hall. Egg, coffee, and the faint tang of disinfectant. The morning rush had faded, leaving only the hum of refrigerators and the gentle clink of utensils cooling in their bins. Lydia wiped the counter with slow, measured strokes. The steam trailed off the pots like mountain fog, soft and aimless, drifting toward the skylight. Eli was stacking trays when a shadow crossed the doorway. Colonel Hayes' tall, composed eyes, sharp even in rest, stepped inside. The room straightened instinctively. At ease, the colonel said, though the air stayed stiff. Morning, Miss Cook. Morning, Colonel, Lydia replied without pause. She didn't salute, but her posture said everything. Hayes approached the prep table, tapping one finger against a folded recipe card lying near her station. You still using these old things? Helps me remember portions? Lydia said, voice mild. The colonel turned the card over. On the back, barely visible beneath faded grease stains, were tiny grid marks and numbers precise like map coordinates. Eli caught sight of them and frowned. "That's not a recipe, is it?" Hayes smiled faintly. "Some habits don't die easy, Private." "Lydia's got her own filing system. It's just measurements," Lydia said quickly, but her hand hovered protectively over the card. "Sure it is," the colonel murmured. "I'd recognize that format anywhere." "Seal field grid, isn't it?" Lydia didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the nearest tray, aligning the edges perfectly. "Old notes," she said at last. "For timing, for rhythm." Eli studied her, really studied her this time. The precision, the command tone wrapped in gentleness. The way she listened to the clock more than the people. Hayes nodded, respecting her silence. He picked up a nearby coin from the counter, a dull silver piece resting beside the napkin stack. The surface caught the light just enough to show the faint emblem of a trident. "You kept it," he said softly. Lydia's eyes followed the reflection. "It keeps me," she replied. The seal coin glinted beneath the fluorescent light, then disappeared as the colonel set it back down. Private Hayes said, turning to Eli, "You've been assigned here long." "A week, sir?" "Then you're lucky. Not many get to see this kind of leadership up close." Eli looked between them, unsure what he was witnessing. "Leadership. She runs a kitchen." "Exactly," Hayes said. "A good soldier knows a command isn't about noise." Lydia gave a small smile like a teacher allowing a partial answer. "Discipline's discipline," she said. "Doesn't matter if it's rifles or recipes." Her words hung there, the kind that echo longer than applause. Hayes nodded once approving. "Carry on, Ms. Cook." When he left, the mess hall felt different, quieter, but fuller somehow. Eli lingered at the table, staring at the folded recipe card. "Ma'am," he said finally, "what's really written on it?" Lydia held the card between her fingers, eyes distant. "Reminders," she said. "Not for food, for formation, for what comes next." He didn't understand, not yet, but he felt the respect rise anyway. She gave a half smile, then folded the card, and the map disappeared. The storm rolled in before noon, gray light swallowing the base thunder, rumbling like faraway machinery. Inside the mess hall, lunch prep had reached its peak. Steam-roared fans hummed radios, whispered static. Then, everything went dark. The sudden silence was sharp enough to make everyone freeze. Pots hissed, lights flickered once, and the emergency alarm clicked on with a hollow beep. "Generators down," someone shouted. "Refrigeration's offline." Eli dropped his ladle. In seconds, the temperature in the kitchen began to climb, the air thick with confusion. "What do we do, ma'am?" he asked. Lydia didn't look panicked. She turned toward the service window, the dim light catching the edge of her seal coin still pinned to her apron. "Hold position," she said evenly. "Switch to manual prep. Team Alpha, secure perishables. Bravo, cover line 1. "Confirm?" The cooks hesitated, glancing at each other. "Ma'am, who's Alpha?" Lydia inhaled, once calm. "You are private. Move." Her voice cut through the noise, low and exact. Someone laughed nervously. "She's running this like a mission." But no one moved until Eli did. He followed her tone, not her words, the rhythm of command buried in habit. "Yes, ma'am. Alpha in motion." Then the crew followed almost instinctively. A few officers from the dining area pushed inside, trying to help. Orders' tangled voices overlapped. Trays clattered. The confusion pressed in like the storm outside. Lydia seemed momentarily pinned by routine, the weight of her role, the limits of what people thought she was. Then, something shifted in her eyes. She took the coin from her apron and set it upright on the counter where it gleamed under the flickering light, a silent proof of service. All stations listen. Her tone sharpened. Call sign. Lima execute echo pattern. No one understood the words, but the sound of them changed the room. The chaos stilled. She moved fast, precise, pointing where needed, never raising her voice. Her voice cut through chaos like memory fire precision, not violence. Every command came short-patterned. Hold the line. Check flank. Rotate station 3. Within minutes, the disorder turned into rhythm. The backup lights blinked alive, and the smell of reheated stew replaced the metallic edge of panic. Colonel Hayes burst in just as the last pot was stabilized. "What happened here?" he demanded. "Temporary power failure," Lydia said calmly. Contained in under 4 minutes. He looked around. Everything spotless, quiet, functional. "How'd you manage that without comms?" "Old training," she said simply. Hayes noticed the coin on the counter. "Still keeping that with you?" "Always, sir," she said, eyes soft but firm. "It reminds me where order begins." Eli stood nearby, covered in steam, watching her as if seeing the word discipline take human form. "Ma'am," he said slowly. "Those weren't kitchen orders, were they?" "No," she admitted. "They were memory drills. Kept people steady once. Keeps me steady now." The colonel gave a nod of deep respect. "Carry on, petty officer." A hush filled the hall as the lights flickered fully back. Lydia turned to her crew. "Good work," she said quietly. Nobody panicked. "That's how you serve?" The young cooks looked at her differently now, less like a cafeteria worker, more like someone who had held a line before. The seal coin glinted again, then settled flat against the counter. When she spoke in code, the room remembered order. The storm had passed overnight, leaving the base washed in pale sunlight. The air smelled like wet asphalt and brewed coffee clean, grounded grateful. By noon, the mess hall reopened, warm light spilling across stainless counters and checkered floors. Everything gleamed again, almost too perfect, as if the place itself wanted to erase the chaos of yesterday. Eli stood near the service line, watching as Colonel Hayes supervised a small gathering by the far wall. In his hands was a framed apron patch, the faded insignia still visible beneath the glass. "This belonged to her," Hayes said quietly. "Found it beside the counter." Lydia wasn't there. She'd taken early leave for the day. The kitchen felt emptier without her steady rhythm. "Sir," one of the younger recruits asked, "why honor a cook?" A ripple of murmurs followed. A few nodded, others frowned. The question wasn't cruel, just curious, maybe a little careless. Hayes let the silence stretch before answering. "Because discipline doesn't always shout," he said. "Sometimes it stirs coffee at dawn and keeps things running when everything else falls apart." The radio hummed softly in the background, a low gospel tune blending with the quiet hum of ceiling fans. Someone poured coffee, and the sound, that slow, deliberate pour, became the room's heartbeat. Eli stepped forward, voice uncertain but sincere. "She saved the base a mess of trouble yesterday. Without her, half our supplies would have gone bad." A corporal shrugged. "Still, it's just food service, right?" "No," Eli said. "It's control under pressure." She didn't panic, didn't shout. She led. "You just didn't recognize the uniform." The remark landed heavier than expected. Hayes gave him a subtle nod, permission to continue. "She used code," Sir Eli added. "Real SEAL brevity calls. I didn't understand half of it, but it worked." That sparked a quiet rustle through the room. The recruits glanced at the framed patch again with new eyes. Hayes placed the frame onto the wall, directly above the coffee urn. A small brass plaque gleamed beneath it. Service is quiet strength. The simple engraving caught the light just so, reflecting across the tiles like a slow sunrise. There, the colonel said softly, right where everyone will see it when they start their shift. The choir hum from the radio deepened, and someone in the back whispered an amen. Eli stepped closer, straightening the frame until it hung perfectly level. He thought of Lydia's stillness during the outage, her calm voice, her precision, her strength disguised as patience. "Sir," he asked, "do you think she'll like it?" "Doesn't matter," Hayes said. "She'd probably say it's too much attention." But she earned it. Another recruit approached with 2 steaming mugs. He handed one to Eli. "Guess that's what quiet service looks like," the recruit said, half smiling. "Yeah," Eli replied, raising the cup slightly. "Doesn't always wear rank." They stood there for a moment, 5 soldiers, 1 wall, and a plaque that said everything words couldn't. Through the radio's soft static came the faint sound of a church choir harmonizing beneath the hum of the mess hall. It wasn't ceremony. It was continuity. The coffee smell lingered, the plaque glowed, and for once the base felt steady, anchored not by command, but by example. Outside sunlight glanced off the flagpole. Inside the framed apron patch caught that same light, a quiet echo of order restored. The morning broke soft and golden, washing the base in a thin layer of light. A cool breeze carried the scent of ocean salt and brewed coffee across the courtyard outside the mess hall. Inside, rows of chairs had been arranged neatly, sunlight pooling across the linoleum like poured honey. It wasn't a grand ceremony, no banners, no speeches overblown with praise. Just a few familiar faces gathered to say goodbye to the woman who'd held their world together in ways few ever noticed. Lydia stood at the center, her uniform-pressed apron folded carefully over her arm. The edges of her hair caught the light like silver thread. She looked smaller somehow, but also, Eli thought, lighter. Colonel Hayes approached first, his expression steady, the respect in his eyes unmistakable. "You kept this base running through storms, outages, and worse," he said. "You did it without asking for credit." Lydia smiled faintly. "Someone had to make sure the coffee stayed hot, sir." The colonel chuckled. "And the discipline." Behind him stood Sergeant Miller, hands tucked behind his back. His earlier arrogance long dissolved. He looked down almost sheepish. "Ma'am," he said, clearing his throat, "I said some things I shouldn't have." "You did," Lydia replied, her tone even. "And you learned. That's what matters." He nodded, the kind of nod that closes a chapter in a man's life. Eli stood near the wall, the same one where the framed apron patch hung beside the plaque, "Service is quiet strength." The brass gleamed softly in the morning sun. When Lydia turned to him, the room stilled. She reached into her pocket and brought out a coin worn smooth from years of handling. The trident emblem was nearly faded now, but it still caught a hint of light. "This belonged to my unit," she said. "It's been with me since my first deployment. It reminded me to hold the line, even when the world forgot there was one." She pressed the coin into his palm. Her hand was steady, her grip light but sure. "Ma'am," Eli said quietly, "I don't know if I've earned this." "You haven't?" Lydia said, smiling gently. "Not yet. That's the point. You carry it until you do." The coin passed between them, a small, shining circle of legacy of duty, continuing in silence. Colonel Hayes watched the exchange, his eyes reflecting something like pride. "You taught him well," he said. "He taught himself," Lydia replied. "I just gave him a map." A brief silence settled, a silent beat, the kind that carried more weight than applause. Outside, the flag stirred in the wind. Inside, the faint sound of the radio drifted in from the kitchen, an old choir recording humming beneath the rhythm of boiling water. Eli looked down at the coin again, thumb brushing over the emblem. He thought of that chaotic day, her calm voice cutting through darkness, the words that brought order. He thought of the plaque of the quiet respect that now filled every corner of the base. "Ma'am," he said softly, "that code you used that day, it wasn't just military, was it?" Lydia tilted her head. "No, it was the same code everyone lives by if they listen close enough." "And what's it called?" She smiled, her gaze turning toward the wall where sunlight touched the plaque. "The quiet code we live by." The phrase lingered gentle and resolute, the echo of the title closing the circle. Lydia picked up her folded apron and nodded to the colonel. "Permission to be dismissed, sir." "Granted," Hayes said, voice rougher than usual. As she walked toward the exit, the morning light followed soft beams spilling across the floor, catching the metal frame of the plaque and finally resting on the coffee steam curling upward like a benediction. Eli stood alone for a moment, listening to the last notes of the radio fading into silence. He tucked the coin into his pocket, feeling its weight light but certain. Then, almost under his breath, he repeated her words. "The quiet code we live by." Outside, the sunlight brightened. Inside, the framed patch shimmered faintly on the wall, its edges golden eternal. If this story moved you, share it forward. Morning sunlight poured through the mess hall windows, catching the framed apron patch and making it glow like a steady lantern in a storm. The radio hummed low beneath the clatter of breakfast trays, and Eli stood by the counter, turning the coin in his hand until it felt warm with memory. Still, he thought of her voice during that outage, the way it cut through confusion, not with rank, but with rhythm, as if duty itself spoke in code, only the quiet understood. Then he pinned the daily roster to the wall, straightened the plaque that read, "Service is quiet strength," and smiled at how the air already carried her order. Outside, sunlight touched the flag. Inside, coffee steam drifted upward like prayer. He whispered, "The quiet code we live by."